After midnight, New York was supposed to be quiet. Deals were already made, territories already understood, and Lucky Luciano was supposed to be untouchable until morning. In the Mafia, the most dangerous moves rarely happen this late. Too many variables, too much darkness, too many ways for things to spiral out of control. That's exactly why they chose that hour. Somewhere after midnight, a decision that had been discussed in whispers finally turned into action. Not a warning, not a test. A move meant to end something permanently. By the time the first rumors began to spread, no one could tell what was true anymore. Some heard Luciano was dead, others heard he was bleeding. A few insisted he was already safe. And in that uncertainty, the city stopped functioning the way it always had. Phones rang without answers. Meetings were canceled without explanation. Men who normally acted with confidence suddenly waited for permission that never came. The attempt itself lasted minutes. The consequences stretched through the entire night. What made this different wasn't just the timing. It was the speed at which fear replaced information. Before dawn, alliances began to crack. Ambitions surfaced too early. Mistakes were made that could not be taken back once the sun came up. By morning, the truth still wasn't clear. But one thing was undeniable. The balance of power that had existed before midnight was gone, not because a man had been killed, but because too many people had revealed themselves while they thought he was. This is the story of the night they tried to kill Lucky Luciano, and how, by sunrise, New York was no longer the same city it had been just hours before. Choosing to move after midnight was not a coincidence. It was a gamble taken by people who understood that daylight brings structure, witnesses, routines, second thoughts. After midnight, none of that exists. Decisions made in the dark don't have time to be debated. They either succeed immediately or collapse before anyone can control the damage. That was the calculation behind the attempt on Lucky Luciano. By that hour, New York's visible order thins out. Police coverage is lighter. Streets empty unevenly. People who shouldn't be out are the only ones still moving. For the underworld, this creates a dangerous illusion, the belief that consequences are slower at night. In reality, they move faster, just less predictably. A single rumor can outrun facts before anyone is awake enough to correct it. The planners knew that if Luciano was eliminated after midnight, the city would wake up already adjusted to his absence. No emergency meetings at dawn, no time to verify loyalties, just instinctive reactions made under pressure. Men would move resources, claim territory, secure positions, all before confirmation arrived. That kind of chaos favors those who are prepared to act without certainty. But this timing also carried a brutal risk. If the attempt failed, there would be no clean reset, no daylight denial, no graceful retreat. Everyone involved would be exposed to the longest hours of the night, the stretch where fear grows and discipline breaks down. Midnight doesn't forgive hesitation. It magnifies it. That's why this wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a forced test of the entire system Luciano had built. Every captain, every intermediary, every quiet beneficiary of his power would be measured by how they behaved in the absence of clarity. Midnight strips away loyalty that depends on reassurance. Once the clock passed that point, there was no neutral position left. Silence became suspicious. Action became dangerous. Waiting became a decision in itself. The city was locked into the consequences of a move that could no longer be undone. They didn't choose after midnight because it was safer. They chose it because by morning, no matter what happened, New York would already be different. The attempt itself unfolded faster than the confusion it created. Within minutes, fragments of information began moving through the city, not as facts, but as interpretations. Someone had heard shots. Someone else heard Luciano was down. Another insisted it was a setup meant to expose disloyalty. In the world surrounding Lucky Luciano, truth never travels alone. It arrives layered with fear. What mattered most was that no single version dominated the night. Different crews believed different outcomes, and each belief demanded a different response. Those who thought Luciano was dead began preparing for opportunity. Those who believed he was wounded hesitated, unsure whether to advance or hide. And those who suspected he was still in control did the most dangerous thing of all. They waited. That split fractured the city invisibly, not by territory, but by assumption. Power centers that once moved in sync suddenly operated on incompatible realities. A man making a move based on one rumor could collide directly with another acting on the opposite belief. The night became a maze where every decision carried the risk of being remembered. Phones became liabilities. Calling the wrong person meant revealing intent too early. Not calling anyone suggested guilt. Messages were passed indirectly through pauses, delays, and half-actions. In that atmosphere, even loyalty became ambiguous. Was someone staying quiet out of respect or out of calculation? The most dangerous outcome of the attempt wasn't bloodshed, it was exposure. Men who had hidden their ambitions for years began to signal them unintentionally. Others revealed fear by moving resources too fast. A few showed their hand simply by asking the wrong questions at the wrong hour. Luciano didn't need to speak for the city to divide. The attempt did that on its own. By attacking him without certainty of the result, the planners forced everyone else to choose a position before dawn. And once a position is taken in the Mafia, it cannot be unseen. By the time the night reached its deepest hours, New York was no longer operating as a single system. It had split into parallel versions of itself, each reacting to a different belief about Lucky Luciano's fate. And when morning came, only one version would survive. The most dangerous stretch of the night wasn't the moment of the attempt. It was everything that followed. The hours before dawn are where discipline breaks down, where plans run out of instructions, and where fear starts filling the gaps left by missing information. Somewhere in that darkness, the city waited to learn whether Lucky Luciano was gone or watching. No one slept, but no one moved with confidence either. The phones that had rung non-stop earlier in the night now went quiet. Silence became intentional. Every unanswered call carried meaning. Every delay felt like a test. Men stared at clocks, not because time mattered, but because morning threatened to lock in whatever mistakes were being made right now. Some crews prepared for war without admitting it. Weapons were shifted quietly. Cash was moved off books. Others did the opposite, freezing in place, afraid that any movement would later be interpreted as betrayal. In the Mafia, the hours before dawn don't reward courage. They punish visibility. What made this window lethal was the absence of confirmation. If Luciano was dead, speed mattered. If he was alive, speed was suicide. With no clear answer, every action existed in both futures at once. A single decision could look brilliant in one timeline and unforgivable in the other. Intermediaries suffered the most. Men who lived between bosses and soldiers suddenly found themselves responsible for choices they weren't meant to make. They delayed. They deflected. They lied to buy time. And in doing so, they exposed themselves. Luciano's system had always relied on clear lines. That night, the lines blurred, and the weak spots showed. As the sky began to lighten, something else became clear. No order was coming. No confirmation would arrive before morning. Whatever Luciano's condition was, he had chosen not to announce it. That silence was not passive. It forced everyone to finish the night on their own terms, and be judged by them later. By the time dawn approached, New York was exhausted, divided, and already marked by decisions that couldn't be undone. The city hadn't waited for morning to change. It changed because morning was coming. Morning arrived without answers. No statement, no confirmation, no visible correction to the chaos of the night. The sun rose over a city that had already acted, and now had to live with it. Whether Lucky Luciano was alive or not almost didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. Some men woke up realizing they had moved too fast. Calls placed in the night could not be unsaid. Resources shifted could not be quietly returned. Ambitions hinted at in darkness looked reckless in daylight. Others recognized the opposite mistake. They had frozen when action was expected, revealing hesitation that would not be forgotten. In the Mafia, timing is judgment. What made the morning dangerous was that it offered clarity without forgiveness. Everyone could now see who had tried to get ahead of the outcome and who had waited to see which way power would fall. Both choices carried consequences. Loyalty revealed under pressure is always more honest than loyalty performed in public. Luciano's greatest advantage emerged here. By refusing to speak, he let the city confess to itself. The night had already separated opportunists from loyalists, the impatient from the disciplined. No interrogation was necessary. Behavior had done the work. The alliances that survived did so not because they were strong, but because they were cautious. Those that fractured did so quietly, without open conflict, as men recalculated who could be trusted after seeing how quickly fear had rewritten priorities. The city didn't explode. It reorganized. By late morning, a new reality had settled in. Even without confirmation of Luciano's condition, the system began to adjust as if he were still present. Decisions slowed. Movements became deliberate again. The lesson of the night had landed. Acting without certainty had a cost. They tried to kill Lucky Luciano after midnight. By morning, they realized something worse had happened. The city had learned how fragile its balance really was, and who had been responsible for holding it together. By the time the day settled into its normal rhythm, the city was functioning again, but not the way it had before. The attempt after midnight didn't just test loyalties, it rewired how power was understood. And at the center of that shift was Lucky Luciano, whether he chose to be visible or not. What became clear in the aftermath was that violence hadn't decided anything. Reaction had. The men who lost ground weren't necessarily those closest to the attempt, but those who revealed impatience. Acting too early had exposed hunger. Acting too late had exposed fear. And in between, the ones who waited learned something invaluable. Restraint was now the most reliable currency. The night taught everyone the same lesson from different angles. Information mattered more than force. Rumors had done what bullets could not. They had forced movement, exposed intent, and stripped away plausible deniability. The city realized that the fastest way to lose power was to act before certainty arrived. Luciano's system emerged stronger precisely because it had been stressed. The weak connections snapped. The unreliable intermediaries showed themselves. No purge was needed, no punishment announced. The structure corrected itself. From that point on, decisions were made more carefully, confirmations demanded more rigor, and midnight moves became something to fear rather than exploit. The most profound change was psychological. Killing a boss had once been seen as a reset button. After that night, it looked like a destabilizing gamble with no guaranteed winner. Power was no longer about who dared to strike first. It was about who could survive uncertainty without revealing themselves. They tried to kill Lucky Luciano after midnight, believing speed would protect them. Instead, speed exposed them. By daylight, the city hadn't just changed leadership dynamics. It had changed its instincts. And once instincts shift, they don't go back. By the time New York fully woke up, nothing looked unusual on the surface. Streets were busy. Businesses opened, conversations resumed. But underneath that routine, the city was no longer operating by the same instincts. Something fundamental had shifted during the hours when certainty disappeared. And Lucky Luciano never had to say a word for it to happen. The attempt after midnight didn't succeed or fail in the traditional sense. It exposed. It forced people to act without confirmation, to reveal ambition, fear, impatience, and loyalty when there was nowhere to hide behind procedure. By morning, everyone knew who had moved too fast, who had frozen, and who had understood that silence was sometimes the safest position of all. Luciano's greatest victory wasn't survival. It was timing. By allowing the night to run its course, he let the system judge itself. No revenge was required. No public correction was necessary. The city reorganized on its own, guided by the mistakes people made when they thought no one was watching. After that night, power in New York felt heavier. Midnight moves were no longer clever. They were reckless. Acting without certainty became a liability, and killing a boss stopped looking like a solution. It started looking like the fastest way to lose control of everything that followed. They tried to kill Lucky Luciano after midnight. By morning, the city understood a harder truth. Sometimes the most decisive moment in the Mafia isn't the shot that's fired. It's the night when everyone reveals who they really are before the sun comes up.